Jake, you're coming on screen, giving you full control. If you want to share your screen as well, I'll add that. I might accidentally ditch out in a second, but I trust that you can.
Okay, let's see. And can everybody see this? I guess that's the first question. All right. All right. So my name is Jake Loveless. I'm one of the co-founders at Edgemesh. And today we're going to talk about site speed. It probably matters more than you think. Site speed is kind of, I always say speed is an enhancing drug. I mean, it takes your existing site and kind of lifts all your existing metrics. But I mean, the reality is that, making a site faster can be a silver bullet for kind of so many metrics that we look at, like ARPU, like conversion rate, like abandonment rate, things like that. And kind of conversely, a slow site is just, it's almost impossible if a site is slow for you to actually kind of achieve these main metrics. No matter what the product is or what the marketing is. I mean, customers only have so much patience. And when we talk about how speed impacts a site, there's really kind of first and second order impacts. So, the first order impacts are the things that we can kind of directly measure, kind of A/B test. And these are things like the conversion rate, total revenue, or, average order value, the bounce rate, the bail ratio, cart abandonment rate, cart to detail rate, things like that. And then there are kind of these nebulous second order impacts that are a little bit more difficult to measure, like search relevancy, ad relevancy and rank, net promoter score, things like that. And here's the reality. So if you had a store that was 5 seconds and you changed nothing, same product, same marketing, same everything, and you were able to decrease that page load time to 3 seconds, you'd see almost a 91% increase in conversion rate. And that's based on data that we've seen across our stores, but it also matches other studies lots of other customers have seen. And kind of 3 seconds is that a very important milestone, because after that, you get about 56% of mobile users will leave a page. It's really, today it's probably about 2.2, 2.3 seconds is where that kind of inflection point is. But to give you a feeling of kind of the impact on conversion rate, again, taking that 5 second store, and if you were to shave off, say, half a second, you'd see a 14% lift. Shave off a full second, you'd see about a 30% lift. Shave off a second and a half, 57% lift. And this kind of goes until obviously you reach a plateau, at a certain point below about 900 milliseconds, there's no material increase in conversion rate, just because, I mean, at that point, the page is almost instant for the user. And, these are kind of numbers that you see in like studies, and you see kind of in aggregates. And I always think it's great to see it really just viscerally. Looking at Google Analytics, and kind of, we always have an A/B split in our traffic, or customers will kind of enable an A/B split as well, so that you can see, and again, this is the same time period, same site, same product, same market. The only difference is the speed at which the page renders. And you can see going from 4.2 to 3.5 seconds, you get an 81% lift in conversion rate. Going from roughly the same, you get another 80%. Another example, going from 2.1, which is actually a pretty quick site, down to 1.5 seconds, you're still getting almost a 50% lift in conversion rate with, real traffic. And it's pretty consistent across industries, across platforms, mobile traffic, desktop traffic, speed, kind of always, it's an absolute direct impact. And the other main thing that you see, and this one's always been kind of weird to me, but as a page gets faster, the average checkout value increases. And of course, cart abandonment decreases. It turns out that kind of once customers have put in a credit card, and kind of gotten to that purchase point, their tolerance for latency decreases very rapidly. So you really want to make sure that that checkout process is as fast as possible. But the average order value increasing, or the average checkout value increasing, was not intuitive to us. And then we had a customer explain it to us. He said, listen, when the site is fast, the customer shops, right? And they end up buying things that they want instead of just things that they need. So, generally a customer's kind of arrived to the site with some purchase intent. And, are they just coming to get the one thing, or is the kind of the back and forth and browsing products and looking at details, does that actually increase the amount of stuff that they add to their cart? And certainly our data continues to show that that's the case. So looking at, consumer good company, again, same products, same website, same marketing, and yet your average order value in this case is up by more than 2 times. An apparel company, athleisure wear company, I think this one is. Again, you're seeing about a 12% lift. Same products, just faster customers are actually checking out with higher order values. Again, cosmetic company, kind of the same impact. So again, customers coming in and buying things that they want and really enjoying interacting with the online experience versus perhaps having that little subconscious frustration, just getting what they need and checking out. And, we could just run through all of these, but basically speed is it's almost like a hurricane blows over your metrics. Kind of all these things get better. You get a lift in conversion rate, you get a lift in revenue per user, you get a lift in average order value, you get a lift in transactions. And again, the exact same product, exact same page, exact same marketing. The only difference is speed. And one of the things we always find interesting is if you look in Google Analytics, there's a thing called the average percentage conversion probability, which is a demographic measure that Google uses. And it basically is a regression of all the demographic information about things that people have bought from, people who have bought things from you. So, age, gender, location, browser, technology type, blah, 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 blah. And you get a score that goes between 0 and 100. And the score itself doesn't really matter so much, but the magnitude matters. So a group of users with a conversion probability of, say, 50 should convert twice as likely as a group of users with a conversion rate of 25. What we find interesting when we pull that metric into Google Analytics with customers is that, again, even if the conversion probability is the same, or like in the case of this mobile screenshot here, the non-accelerated users actually had a higher conversion probability, you actually can still see the impact of speed. It's also a good way to make sure you don't have bias in your data. So again, speed, definitely an enhancing drug. All right. So speed matters. So what do we do about it? Well, I think the first step is you have to measure correctly, right? You can't improve what you can't measure. And unfortunately, kind of in the industry, we've had a lot of kind of focus on what are called synthetic metrics. So if you've ever gone to your Google page speed score, or Shopify actually uses synthetic metric in its thing. Synthetic metrics are when you spin up a browser and you go to the website cold and you load the page. They are originally designed for auditing. They do not represent your performance. They're not only meaningless, they're almost always wrong. So if you were to look at, for example, this one here with Allbirds, the bottom there at PageSpeed Insights, the lab data, which is synthetic data, the first contentful paint is 5 seconds, but the field data, which is real user metric data, is actually 1.9. So what you really need to do is implement a real user metrics system so that you can at least get a feeling of what the real data is. If you can't do that, Google actually publishes its field data for sites in what's called CRUX, the Chrome Real User Experience. But ideally, you want to be able to capture this stuff for yourself. And you don't want to look at averages. An average in web performance is useless because it's so easily skewed by an outlier. And you really want the entire distribution, but if you can't get that, you need to look at the median and the 75th percentile. So one of the things that we like to do, Google does the same thing, is for each metric, we kind of have breakpoints of what's fast, what's average, and what's slow. And that allows you to say, oh, 25% of my users have a fast first paint time, and 25% have an okay first paint time, and 50% have a slow first paint time. So again, I can't really give you one number ideally, but if I can give you 3 numbers, you can kind of get a feeling of that distribution. And again, the outliers matter, right? So if 10% of your customers are experiencing a 9-second page load, that's 10% of your customers who just aren't going to buy anything. And the right way to think about kind of how outliers impact your business is like, nobody gets to your site for free. You've either paid with content or you've paid with advertising dollars. So if they're going to bounce or bail out of the site because you've got a performance issue, that's money and or time that we just wasted. So looking at how you fix this, I mean, this is an entire sub-industry of engineering, but it essentially breaks down to 2 things. You've got kind of server-side stuff. So you can change hosting provider if that's an option. You can add a content delivery network if that's an option. You can change compression. You can change protocols. You can do image optimization. You can change code, you can go headless, stuff like that, kind of re-platform. Those are all kind of traditionally on like the developer IT side of the house, and that's server side improvement. And that stuff's all great. And if you can do that, definitely do that. The other side of the house that often gets overlooked is the client side. And really, this is things like tag management and kind of changing the load order of which things happen, but also taking advantage of the browser cache, adding preloading, and a service worker, which is what we do for a living. So client side generally, never requires infrastructure changes, can generally come out of a marketing budget because the impact the deployment's very easy and the impact is actually marketing metrics. Server side traditionally comes out of a development or IT budget, because it's kind of viewed as a cost center, even though the impacts can be pretty significant on the marketing side of the house. So what is a client-side accelerator? So we use a feature of the browser called the service worker. And probably the best way to think of the worker is like a proxy in the browser. So the service worker was originally designed by Google to allow websites to work offline, like Gmail. And basically, when a page makes a request, say to pull an image, normally it would check to see if it's in memory and then see if it was in its browser cache. And if not, then it would go to the network. When you have a service worker enabled on the site, that request, before it gives up and goes out to the network, has a chance to run a piece of code called the service worker code. And this is where we fit in. And so what we do is we create a cache or a stable storage on that device in that browser for that website. So if you think about kind of how caching works in a browser, the first place the browser wants to check is in memory, because that's almost instant. If it's not there, it'll check what's called a spillover cache, which is very, very, very small, because these top 2 caches need to be shared across every website. And then with Edgemesh, or kind of more generally with service workers, you can create a cache in that browser on disk just for that website, and it can be very, very big. It can theoretically be up to 20% of the free drive space on the device. And then, of course, the last place is the network, right? We don't have it on the device. We don't have the image on the device. We need to go fetch it from the network and pull it down. And again, kind of seeing the impact here, you've got basically, I'm going to try in memory. If that fails, I'm going to try spillover cache in disk. If that fails, now the Edgemesh code comes in and says, oh, you want this piece of JavaScript. I actually have it here in this cache that I created, and here it is. And the important thing about pulling data from on the device is you're saving a network call. These things can all happen in parallel. And of course, they're really, really fast. It's a lot faster to pull something off the device's local disk than it is to go fetch it over the internet, especially on mobile. And so what ends up happening is, aside from the overall speed getting better, your distribution or kind of latency, it becomes a lot tighter. Customers are a lot less prone to network impact. So if you've got a high percentage of traffic that's mobile, this is absolutely critical. Because, customers on cellular, even though cellular is better today than it was 5 years ago, it's still very volatile. So if you can get that information in their device and save that network request, that's going to be a win. And so where does the AI come in? Well, one of the things that we do is what's called intelligent prefetching. So if you think about the way a web page works, a website, any e-commerce site, is essentially just a collection of assets, right? You've got images and fonts and JavaScript and things like that. And a lot of the pages will share a lot of the assets, right? They'll share the same font. They might share the same CSS. So you can imagine a website as a collection of assets. And so what we do in the background is every time a page loads, you're kind of sending to Edgemesh how long each of the assets took to fetch. And in the background, Edgemesh is keeping track of which assets were requested and what their latency was. And so once the users finish loading the page, so they go to the home page and the page is loaded, now they're actually reading the page or interacting with the page. We may have, a couple hundred milliseconds to a second to do some work. So the Edgemesh client will call out to the backend and say, hey, I've loaded this page and here's what I've got in my cache. What should I run ahead of my user and pre-download? And so this pre-caching or pre-fetching or pre-downloading is totally dynamic. It's based on where real customers go and the assets that they need. And what it allows us to do is, in effect, hide the latency, right? So when the user clicks the detail of a product, a lot of that page's assets have already been preloaded and popped into the cache. And one of the things that we have to do, and there's kind of a lot of math that goes on in the background here, but kind of breaking it down, if you had two assets, say a.javascript and b.javascript, and one takes 200 milliseconds to load and one takes 400 milliseconds to load, what you want to decide which one to pull in first, you want to maximize the expected value. So the slower asset that maybe has a lower probability of need might actually be more valuable to pull in, because if you do need it, the 450 milliseconds is pretty painful. And this is what kind of the back end of Edgemesh is doing all the time. It's doing something on the order of about 4 billion metrics a day. And the impact of that is kind of the median cache hit rate for our customers is 62%. So that means if you take a website, and the average website has about 180 assets, 62% of those on every single page load never even need to go get pulled from the server because they've been effectively pre-cached or cached intelligently. And these small kind of cache wins and small parallel performance gains actually add up to big numbers, right? So this graph kind of shows, as if you imagine, obviously, if 0% of the page was cached, it's going to load like it loads. And if 50% of the page is cached, it might end up actually loading twice as fast. And so we kind of look at the impact of this across all of our customers. And we have a couple hundred customers now. So looking at the impact of this, timed interactive, which is really, really important for conversion rate. Timed interactive is essentially how long it takes until the website can be scrolled and clicked and add to cart and the things that kind of matter. The median customer is seeing about a 55% lift, right? So that means you're literally cutting their time to interactive in half. A page that used to take 4 seconds now takes 2 seconds. All because you're able to serve so much content from the device's local cache. First contentful paint, which is still critical for search. First contentful paint is essentially how long it takes a page to go from blank to non-blank, right? So it literally means the first bit of content that is painted to the screen. And it's really important because it answers the user question of, is this page working? And here you can kind of see a little different distribution where, the cache is generally 20, 30, 40, 50%, kind of cutting that number down. Because again, we want to identify the most important object and we want to make sure that we pull that into cache. And then largest contentful paint, which is now a Google Core Web Vital. This is essentially like the hero image. Generally, it's kind of like the biggest piece of content that gets painted onto the screen. It's a really important piece of content, so we want to make sure that we're always focusing on it from a cache standpoint. We want to try to pre-cache that as you move from page to page. And what we're seeing here is kind of that distribution is much more skewed because we're so focused on it from a caching standpoint. And again, you know, about a third of the customers, well, half the customers are seeing somewhere between a 50 and 70% faster, largest contentful paint. So again, you're kind of cutting that largest contentful paint time in half. And since this is now a core web vital, which means it will theoretically be a ranking factor in search, even though I can tell you for a fact that first contentful paint is a ranking factor in search, it's really important to make this stuff as fast as possible. So again, kind of client-side acceleration, you end up making the site faster by just making the browser smarter. And you can do this on any website. It doesn't require any infrastructure changes. You're just adding a tag to the site, kind of like adding Google Analytics. And the great thing is since you've got kind of AI in the background using real user traffic to make real user metric-based decisions, there's no manual input, right? So the more your customers interact with the site, the more information the backend is going to get, the more intelligently it's going to be able to pre-cache content, the faster the next set of page loads are going to be. So really, it's nice. It's a set it and forget it kind of system.
Jacob, we're coming up on time. Ah, perfect.
Yeah, and we're all done.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
That was awesome. I'm really sorry about the poor introduction. I'm glad you were able to get moving while I had seriously bad timing on my internet going out for about.
Glad to see you got the internet back, champ.
It was funny because earlier I said, I was talking with Christine and I said, my biggest pet peeve with e-commerce merchants, because I talk to a lot of them, is that they say that they need their site to load faster. And I always tell them, you don't need your site to load faster. You want your conversion rate to go up. And
Right.
and you're proving with your technology that how your tool impacts basically on-site conversion rate. So site speed is improved, conversion rate increases, and that's, you know, the core metric that the merchant's really looking at. But what you just showed me, which I thought was completely jaw-dropping, is that you have an AI technology deciding which asset to preload first based on this like predictive algorithm of size versus likelihood to reach that next asset. And I was like, holy crap, that's smart. Like that is, wow. I could absolutely see your technology just becoming the backbone of the internet. I think it would be great if we could just have you everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and it saves server bandwidth. So, you know, we have some super big shops, and you know, they'll turn on Edgemesh, and all of a sudden you'll just see bandwidth go. Nice. And it's just because, you know, caching on the device is the way to go, man. It's always easier to pull the picture off your phone than to pull it off the internet.
Yeah, so it's really incredible technology. When do you recommend at like certain, let's say, page views a month or maybe revenue a month for a merchant to invest in Edgemesh?
Yeah, I say speed is an enhancing drug. So it takes your existing traffic and site and kind of enhances it.
Yeah.
Until you get to probably about 5 million in rev, you probably are your money is best spent on acquiring traffic. Which, yeah, you can make an argument that speeds will do that, but advertising will do that much more effectively. Yeah. But once you've got kind of a consistent level of traffic, and you want to just kind of pump up that conversion, you want to be at a revenue place where doubling the conversion rate makes a material impact to your business.
Yeah.
And you know, so around 5 million a year is probably a good place to start.
I bet even smaller shops can use it. And also I'm thinking of businesses that maybe have invested a lot in their blog, and there might be, you didn't say that you improve organic search rankings, but if the pages are loading that much faster, I'm imagining there's some sort of secondary impact here.
There definitely is. It's just I can't measure it anywhere explicitly. So
yeah, it's not a straight A/B test. It's a before and after thing, and so many things impact how that could change.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Although Google has said the core web vitals, which are kind of their metrics for performance, will go in search. But again, I can tell you for an absolute fact that first contentful paint is in search today because it leads to search abandonment. People search for something, they click cat sweaters, they get to a page is blank, they don't know that they're working, they hit the back button. So
yeah.
Cool.
That's funny because I think that's the other pet peeve that I was hinting at with merchants is that they say they're like, Shopify gives me the speed score. I don't know if you've seen this.
I have.
Speed score. We can talk trash about this another time, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's like, it doesn't explain, like you said, the first contentful paint or anything like that. It just is a random number between, basically pick a number between 0 and 80. I've never seen it higher than that. And good luck. Like, and then, wrong. Yeah. So, and I posted on my LinkedIn a little while ago about this scam where there are people who will game the system and make it look like your score went up, your Shopify score went up, but actually they're just delaying all JavaScript loads for like 5 seconds, and then so your score goes up, but then your whole user experience goes to trash, which is a great way to destroy conversion rate and not good at all.
Yeah, what ends up happening is you'll make that very first page load really fast, but then because you've delayed everything, kind of essentially thrown all the junk in the trunk there, the user goes to click the button to add to cart or look at a detail page, all of that JavaScript has to run and it all has to finish running and then get unloaded. So you'll see what's called the unload event, increase in time. And boy, that's super frustrating because the user will click and then the page will look hung.
And that's brutal.
Oh, just
don't fall for that one.
Work for me.
So. All right, we are running a little bit behind, so I've got to cut it there. Jake, thank you so much. This technology is absolutely brilliant, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in the hands of more merchants very soon.
Thanks, bud. Good to see you.